latest reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrives in Alaska, saying Moscow has a clear, understandable position and arguments to support it at the forthcoming meeting between President Vladimir Putin and his US counterpart, Donald Trump. And Hezbollah chief accuses Lebanon's government of handing the country to Israel by pushing for the group's disarmament, warning that the move could lead to civil war. Turkey arrests 40 people in Istanbul in the latest wave of opposition detentions, including the mayor of Beyoğlu district and several of his close advisors. South Korea expresses deep disappointment and regret over Japanese officials visiting a Tokyo war shrine on the 80th anniversary of World War II's end, saying future ties require Japan's remorse for past wrongs. And talks aimed at striking a landmark global treaty on plastic pollution fall apart as countries fail to find consensus on how the world should tackle the ever-growing scourge. Hello and welcome. Let's begin with the conflict-hit Democratic Republic of Congo, where US President Donald Trump is trying to play a peacemaker. He is eyeing more US access to the DRC's vast mineral resources. And to further his peace and stability campaign, the Trump administration has now imposed sanctions on 4 groups accused of illicit mining and armed violence in DRC. This includes the PARECO-FF armed group, which controlled the key coltan mining site of Rwanda from 2022 to 2024. The site is now controlled by Rwanda-backed M23. The mine produces 15 to 30% of the world's supply of coltan, a key mineral that is used in electronics such as laptops and mobile telephones. Now, Washington has also slapped sanctions on the Congolese mining company, the CDMC, saying it sold minerals that were sourced and smuggled from mines near Rwanda. 2 Hong Kong-based export companies, East Rise and Star Dragon, also face US sanctions for allegedly buying minerals from the armed group. Now, the CDMC has categorically rejected alleged links to armed groups and mineral smuggling. The company said that they were not the perpetrators, but the primary victims of the armed conflict in the region. The fact that the M23 was not present on the new US sanctions list also triggered reactions. Experts believe this move might be aimed at not derailing talks going on in Doha between the DRC and M23. Moreover, the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels are already facing US sanctions since 2013. Now, human rights groups also said that over the years, some US companies, particularly in the technology and manufacturing sectors, have also faced accusations of sourcing cobalt, tantalum, tin, and gold from suppliers linked to armed groups. Now, these fresh US sanctions are also tied to the controversial Minerals for Security proposal, under which the DRC President Felix Tshisekedi offered the US preferential access to the DRC's mineral reserves. This in exchange for formal security assistance against the M23 rebellion and other militias that are destabilizing the East. Now, the Trump administration hopes an eventual peace deal will attract billions in Western investment to natural resource-rich Eastern DRC, which has suffered extreme violence for more than 3 decades. In July, the Congolese government and the M23 signed a declaration of principles in Qatar that included a permanent ceasefire aimed at halting the conflict. It followed a separate peace deal between the Congolese and Rwandan governments that was signed in Washington in June. However, peace in the region remains as elusive. The DRC army and the Rwanda-backed M23 have accused each other of violating the ceasefire deal. The two sides had earlier agreed to sign a permanent peace deal by the 18th of August, but the renewed fighting has threatened this effort. And moving on, let's turn our attention to Senegal. Since taking office last year, President Bassirou Faye has aggressively pushed for anti-corruption reforms. But a new transparency reform has reshuffled some features. Now, President Faye has vowed to return financial accountability to the Senegalese government after his predecessor left billions of dollars in hidden debt. But a new anti-corruption law has made the critics question Faye's own commitment to his anti-corruption push. Last year in February, Senegal plummeted into a sudden debt crisis after a public audit found that former President Sall's administration had understated deficits, pushing the actual debt to GDP ratio at the end of 2023 to about 100%. Now, this was far higher than the previously reported 74%. As a part of Faye's broader anti-corruption crackdown, 5 former ministers have also been arrested so far. And now his administration has come up with a draft law that seeks to expand the 2014 Asset Declaration Law for high-ranking public servants. Previously, the law only applied to senior officials, including the President of the National Assembly, the Prime Minister, ministers and public accountants handling over $1.8 million. With the new provision, public prosecutors, investigating judges, local authorities, auditors and directors of public companies will have to declare their assets at the beginning and end of their tenure. The proposal also seeks to lower reporting threshold from nearly $1.8 million to about $900,000 for public budget managers. However, the proposal is facing criticism for exempting President Faye from declaring his assets at the end of his term. So basically, the new law will not apply to the president himself. The opposition politicians from the Senegalese Democratic Party argue that outgoing presidents should also be held accountable for declaring their assets. Meanwhile, leaders from the ruling party, the PASTEF parliamentary group, have defended the bill by quoting the Constitution. The ruling party has stressed that the Constitution only mandates assets declarations at the beginning of a president's term, asserting that the Constitution holds more weight than the new law. The proposal has intensified the conversation around transparency and accountability in Senegalese politics. The draft law is set for debate in the National Assembly on the 18th of August, and the outcome of this debate will be closely watched by the entire country. And shifting focus now to the Mediterranean, where another migrant shipwreck has struck after 2 boats that had left Libya for Europe capsized, carrying several African migrants. At least 27 migrants have died after crowded boats sank off the Italian island of Lampedusa. 3 minors, including a newborn baby, along with 7 women and 13 men, were among the dead. Their identities have not yet been disclosed. At least 60 people have been rescued. More than 80 people were on the 2 boats when they capsized. Among the survivors are mostly Somali nationals and a few Egyptians. Some unaccompanied minors from Pakistan were also among them.
Hey, okay. Sei salva.
The survivors brought into the hotspot arrived in reasonable health. Naturally, there was exhaustion, and psychologically they were quite shaken. We immediately took action to provide all the necessary care and initial consultations by our multidisciplinary team, especially our psychologist.
An Italian helicopter spotted a capsized boat and several bodies in the water on Wednesday, about 14 nautical miles off Lampedusa. Now, the exact cause of the accident has not yet been confirmed, but it is believed that one of the boats began taking on water, causing people to climb onto the other vessel, which then also capsized. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni expressed her sorrow over the tragedy, saying that when a disaster like this happens, a strong sense of dismay and compassion arises in all of us. This is the latest migrant disaster on the central Mediterranean route. It's the sea journey from North Africa, especially Libya and Tunisia, across the central Mediterranean to Italy or Malta. Thousands die each year in desperate attempts to reach Europe. The UN says over 700 refugees and migrants have already died in 2025 on this route, which it calls the world's deadliest maritime migrant crossing. Now, despite the risks, migrant boats continue to arrive. 4 others were intercepted off Lampedusa overnight, and more migrants arrived on Thursday. Italy has vowed to cut the number of migrants crossing the Mediterranean to Europe. It has an agreement with Libya aimed at curbing migration across this route, under which Italy provides financial, technical and material support to Libya to stop the migrant boats from departing for Europe. Despite this, more than 38,500 people have arrived on Italian shores so far this year. And now another tragedy on the world's deadliest migrant crossing is raising fresh questions over whether current policies, deals and patrols can ever truly stop the dangerous journeys from North Africa to Europe. And for our last story, let's start with a question. How often have you paid attention to the world map? Just take a quick look at any hanging world map on your wall, or maybe do a quick Google search. Now, chances are this pops up on your screen. This is called the Mercator projection, which is widely used and shapes our understanding of maps. Now, this is courtesy the Gerard Mercator, a Flemish cartographer from modern-day Belgium, who invented it in 1569. He is the same man who also coined the word atlas. It started as a tool for sailors, but over time it became the map that we use in schools, books, and online. This map has now become the standard. But Africa is not happy with it. Several advocacy groups want the world to adopt a new map, and the African Union is now backing this demand. Why? Because this map makes Africa look much smaller than it really is. Now, African leaders want the world to switch to a fairer map. They say the projection distorts continent sizes, enlarging areas near the poles like North America and Greenland, while shrinking Africa and South America. Take a look at Greenland on this map, and now look at Africa. They look almost the same size. Not just Greenland, but even the United States, China, and the whole of Europe all appear about the size of Africa. But here is an alarming fact. In reality, Africa is 14 times larger than Greenland. It is so big that you could fit the USA, China, and most of Europe together into Africa's landmass, and there would still be some room to spare. Africa is the second largest continent. It covers about 20% of the Earth's land. It has 54 recognized sovereign states, and its population is over 1.4 billion people. Now, criticism of the Mercator map has been brewing for a while, but it has now been revived by the Correct the Map campaign, led by advocacy groups Africa No Filter and Speak Up Africa. Now, what are they suggesting? They want a new world map, which looks like this. This is the Equal Earth map, which does not distort size. Every part of the world is shown in correct proportion to its real land area. Countries near the equator, like those in Africa and South America, are not shrunk, and polar areas are not exaggerated. It was created in 2018 by 3 cartographers, Bojan Savrich, Bernard Jenny, and Tom Patterson. Now, the African Union has backed this campaign, and officials say that the Mercator projection has fostered a false impression that Africa was marginal, and the fight is about reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage.
The African Union supports this campaign and sees that this campaign, through various actions aimed at promoting this really accurate mapping and addressing historical inaccuracies. So being closely aligned with the AU broader goals of reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage, challenging false narrative and promoting a more accurate and equitable representation of the continent, this campaign really aligns with several actions that are directly or indirectly linked to the campaign, but supports its broader objective.
The AU will push for a wider adoption of the map and discuss collective actions with member states. The campaign states it has sent a formal request to the UN geospatial body. A UN spokesperson said that once received, it must be reviewed and approved by a committee of experts.
Right now we're actively working on promoting a curriculum where the Equal Earth projection will be the main standard across all classrooms, and that it will be also the projections that's being widely used by all global institutions, including African ones as well. And to us, that's definitely going to be a metric of success, making sure that all of us actually use the Equal Earth projection as just the standard and the new norm, really.
So the next time you look at a world map, remember, it may not be telling the full story. Africa is far bigger than it's been made to look, and the continent is now demanding that the world sees it as it truly is. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, and goodbye.